dun.
All right, so I got to confess something to you too.
Okay, what?
I, until about 3 minutes ago, was heavily reading Throne of Glass. So my mind is in Throne of Glass world right now, and I have to switch.
Well, I'm happy for you. How far in are you?
I'm like halfway through book one, a little less than halfway through book one.
And you're reading Throne of Glass first.
I'm reading Throne of Glass first. I believe in reading things in the order that they were published.
I did the same exact thing for the same exact reason. So
yeah, that's my stance on that. I know others might feel differently, but like
people get up in arms about the reading order of this series. It's kind of crazy.
And
I love you guys for it, but
the same thing where I'm desperately trying to avoid spoilers. I will say I know I got spoiled that one person dies, but then you find out very early in this book that he's already dead, and I was like, okay, fine, that's great. Other than that, I know absolutely nothing. Like right now we're in a love triangle. I truly have no idea how it ends. I'm very excited.
You have to stay off social media. Like, yeah, please. I'll do anything.
Spoil me.
I'll do whatever you want.
I know, I'm so scared. And I'm even like, I was like, because I have like an idea in my mind, but there's always fan art, right? So I'm like Googling images of fan art, and I'm kind of like this. I'm like, no, don't look at it, because what if you get spoiled?
Abby's putting her hands over her eyes for those who are listening with audio only. I've been seeing a lot of people recently on social media put their hand on the book as they're reading and like moving it down. I've never done this in my life, but I think it's the funniest thing ever. People are like, I don't want to know.
I have to when I get to the and I think this is why there's a lot of reasons I like paperback more. There's a lot of reasons to like Kindle too, but yeah, like with Kindle you can't like really cover it up. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anyways, hi, I'm Ronnie.
I'm Abby.
And this is Dragons in the Details, where we pick apart our favorite fantasy series over the course of an undetermined number of episodes. Still undetermined. I think we're still getting requests to like cover different topics, so we need to sort out our schedule for how many of these are actually left.
Yeah, we think just when we think we're done, they pull us back in.
This season, if you're new here, is focused on the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. If you are new here, you're welcome to start here. You're welcome to start at the beginning.
It's a pick your own adventure podcast.
Choose your own adventure. Just quick disclaimer, these episodes contain spoilers up through Onyx Storm. If you have not finished Onyx Storm, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Please leave now. Save this. Come back later. And also, due to the contents of the series, this podcast is rated R and should only be listened to by mature audiences. Each week, we're diving into a specific topic in depth, and that's been our structure. We're coming with receipts. We have quotes to back up any theories until we come up with them on the fly. And then we do not have quotes, but we find them most of the time. I would say we're pretty good about saying, like, hold the phone, let's find the quote. And
you guys have been great at coming with receipts, which is awesome, because there's nothing I love more than a well-structured discourse and argument. So thank you for coming with quotes. The emails we're getting, the DMs we're getting, these like, you guys are typing up these full quotes. I'm so impressed. So thank you for that. It's wonderful.
No, we had one person, and I still have it on my to-do. I think it'll probably be next mailbag to follow up. We had one person email us with like all of the times they could record on when Violet gets dizzy, which is something that we've had like in our backlog, but it literally requires a full reread with that intent because like it's crazy. You guys are rock stars. Keep it up, and we will keep replying. I think we've been replying to everything.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can. At this point, it used to be like for corrections and omissions and social media shout outs, I would like pull it together the day before. Now I literally just have a running list. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do this episode? What are we going to do next episode?
I just screenshot. Yeah. Anytime I'm replying to a comment and I'm like, oh, I should bring this up, I try and screenshot it as best I can. Okay, this episode is part 2 of our history deep dive. So in this episode, we're going to be focusing on things like the Second Krovlan Uprising, the Tyrrish Rebellion, other speculation on history. I would strongly recommend listening to History Part 1 first, which was our last episode that we released, that covers the origin story, the Great War, the unification. I just feel like it's a better place to start.
Not entirely choose your own adventure. Sorry, guys. A little.
Yeah. We're reneging on that recommendation.
At least this time we planned to do a part 1 and a part 2. So we planned it much better than our last part 1, part 2 episode. But we were brand new then, guys. So
true.
Please forgive us.
The OGs know that we talked about Xaden for 3 hours and we're like,
yeah.
We need to chop this in half.
That was the second episode we ever recorded, and we didn't really know how to podcast yet. We still don't really know how to podcast.
We're really winging it as best we can here.
Yeah.
Okay, announcements.
Yay, it's our first announcement section, guys.
First announcement section. We are now on Discord. Abby, do you want to talk about the request we got to open up a Discord?
Okay. Their name is, and I'm so sorry if I butcher this, Gabija Konopacha is going to be my guess. I'm not totally sure how you pronounce that. I believe she's Lithuanian. But thank you, Gabija.
Yeah, I saw her.
Great idea. So we have started a Discord. And we have different topics on there. So obviously we have Empyrean theory spoilers, but we also have like a book recommendation thread that's been getting some awesome suggestions. I personally just finished my bedtime book and asked for input and got some great suggestions. But now I'm so into Throne of Glass, I don't know that I'll have the brain power to read anything else.
You're done. You're done. You're not reading anything else for the next month. I'm so sorry.
I know, because we have this. Okay, so secrets out, guys. Ronnie and I have like a girls' trip. I guess it's not a girls' trip. The guys are coming too, but we have a trip planned for next weekend. I'm like, how many of these books should I bring? Because if it were like just me, I would bring like 2 to 3, but like we gotta have friend time too.
Oh, so you bought the full series in
no, but
actual book format.
I will buy the full
I
series.
would just buy the next one on Kindle just so you have it. You're probably going to end up buying it anyways.
I'm going to finish Throne of Glass before we go up for sure. I think I need to buy the next 2. I think I need to have the next 2 books. Yeah, so there's book recommended. Anyway, getting back to Discord, which is the point of this conversation.
Which is the point.
So yeah, we have channels for off-topic stuff. We have channels for book recs. We have Empyrean spoiler heavy thread. One hasn't gotten much discourse yet. So I think because we're talking in so many other places about it. But we also have like an episode reaction channel, so you guys can tell us how you think we're doing, or just talk about our episodes in general. Yeah, it's been really fun so far. A lot of people are already on it, which is great, and it's just really positive environment talking about books.
Love it. I will say, because I'm just gonna be this person of the 2 of us, I think, because it's been happening a bit on TikTok. If you are mean, we'll kick you out. Don't be mean to other people. It's not cool.
Be fucking mean.
Just be nice.
Yeah, just be nice. Just be nice. That's all I'm gonna say.
Just be nice.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do. So now we have a Discord, which is super exciting. And because we've gotten some emails, some comments within that Discord, we are going to announce to you all, I think you've probably already figured it out based on our what are you reading at the end of each podcast.
And you're all real smart because you come in with your awesome theories. So you have figured this out if you are listening to this podcast. So
season 2 of this podcast is going to be on the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. I was going to make a quip and then I decided not to. But yes, so those who are well versed in the Maas universe, hopefully that's exciting. A Court of Thorns and Roses is, I think, the book that reeled me like kind of headfirst into Romantasy. We also know obviously that she has 2 other series that are very famous, Crescent City and Throne of Glass, and Abby is bravely playing catch up so that when you guys all come into our comment sections about theories from across the universe, hopefully they're not rampant spoilers. But we are going to try to focus on A Court of Thorns and Roses kind of as its own entity and limit kind of the cross universe to a specific section. So if you haven't read the other 2 series, then you'll be okay and we'll tell you when to.
Yeah, right. So I think okay, first of all, it's just dawning on me that before we start recording season 2, which I'm hoping is not that far in the future, I have to do my ACOTAR reread and finish all of Throne of Glass.
You're just going to get spoiled if you don't. By the way, Massverse spoilers here. Sorry. Yeah, like maybe we just make it for people who've read everything.
Yeah.
We'll see. Anyways, season 2, ACOTAR.
You heard it here first. Unless you're one of the people that we already secretly told.
Yeah, you probably didn't. Yeah. All right. Corrections, omissions, and social media shoutouts. Abby, do you have any to share with the class?
Yeah, I do. All right. So the first one is an omission. So in History Part 1, we talked about the possibility of runes being an ancient language with actual meaning rather than just, I don't know, being nonsense symbols. And I said, wait, don't the dragons have their own language? I remembered there was a quote about the dragons having their own language. I found it. So the dragons do have their own language. The quote is, and the scenario is Iron Flame chapter 45, they're about to learn about runes, actually, ironically. So I think it's funny that Rebecca, or maybe not funny that Rebecca put this in here so close to when we're learning about runes. Riddick and Darna is in her moody teenage years, right? And Riddick accidentally calls her a mini Tarn. Basically, he calls her a mini me, and she gets pissed off that he called her small. And Violet says, no more spending time with Sgaeyl. I mean it. She's rubbing off on you. And Darna says, I could only be so lucky. And Darna lifts her head, preening, and Tarn grumbles something in his own language. So that there is a dragon language. So I think it's intriguing, the idea that runes are a logosyllabic language, and that the dragons have their own language. However, dragons still don't have opposable thumbs.
They can't write. It's not a written language. They cannot.
So, like, I don't know that works.
I don't think it's the same language.
Yeah.
Or maybe they learned to read it and the humans were writing it. I don't know.
I don't know. So I was right, but also when thinking about it more, I'm probably wrong. Yes. So that's my first one. My second one, or do you have any omissions?
Yeah, I do. I still stand behind everything that we said, except for the fact that we forgot one important detail. So last episode, we talked about a kind of crazy theory that Sgaeyl and Tarn had to kill elders to abscond with these dragon eggs. And like that's why the elders are dead and dragon eggs are missing. We did not realize or bring up that at the end of Onyx Storm, it does say in clear sequence, so you could draw relationships, right? That 4 riders, their dragons, and 3 elders were murdered in the valley in the last few hours. And then it stated 6 eggs are missing from the hatching grounds as of the latest tally. So we're aware now that there were 3 elders that were killed in the valley. So maybe you guys have a point on elders dying being correlated with the dragon eggs. I still think that there's no way that Tarn and Sgaeyl killed them. Like, just based on everything Andarna went through with Solus, it just feels incorrect that they were responsible for their deaths.
Dragon egg on my face on that one for sure, guys. But yeah. Okay. And I want to defend myself a tad.
Yeah.
The reason why I forgot about the elders, and we've gotten this question on Discord and I answered it, so I'm happy answering it here. Our like last episode on our Onyx Storm coverage will be the end of Onyx Storm, right? That's going to be like our magnum opus. That's going to be like, okay, all our theories have led to this point. So I am kind of intentionally not including any of that. I know I've kind of blurred that line, but I'm like kind of trying to avoid rereading the end of Onyx Storm because we have so much that will be coming in that episode, and I don't want to have already talked about all of it before we get to that point. So that's why I forgot about the elders being murdered. I apologize.
I did too.
That's my fault. But
we both did.
Yeah, but for Sgaeyl and Tarn to have done that,
yeah, it feels wrong.
There's got to be lines. Like they're villains then, right? Like they're like Sgaeyl or Tarn wouldn't kill Solus because right. Yeah. So like I just don't see how he could then turn around and kill an elder.
Elders, yeah. No, I don't think that that's what happened. Like there are so many other ways that elders could have died in that battle. Like it was a literal bloodbath.
Right.
So no. I vote no.
I vote no.
I like the effort. Okay. Social media shout outs.
All right. So we had a good theory. And there's a couple people who kind of alluded to this theory on the post we did about Jack's signet, where I said I thought he might be wielding pure power. M. Willis wrote, I almost wonder if his signet mirrors that of who he selects. Like he was with Violet and channeled pure power. And in Iron Flame, he deflects Xaden's shadows, which is his signet. So we talked about the idea of Violet being a mimic. And I think on our signets episode. Could Jack be the mimic? So the quote from Iron Flame is, Jack's head swings in our direction and he wields with an outward-facing palm, throwing a shield that deflects Xaden's shadows as blood sprays from Bade's throat onto the wardstone. The black flames extinguish an instant before Bade collapses, her weight pitching forward. I don't necessarily read this as mimicking, but I do think it's interesting that Jack can just like deflect Xaden's shadows. I don't think we've seen anyone else deflect Xaden's shadows, right?
Yeah, I either saw this comment too, or maybe we got a similar one on TikTok. I do think it's interesting that he deflects Xaden's shadows, but to me, that didn't read like shadow wielding because it says he threw up a shield.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, is this venom magic? We still don't really know what Jack's signet was if he ever manifested one. And we also still don't really understand how Venon's magic works. Like, we just learned in the last book that like maybe they wield signets rather than just power. But I think Jack has more of a case for being a mimic than Violet does at this point.
I think so too. And I think it's interesting when you think about the balance. Like we've talked about how the balance is not necessarily like a 1-to-1, like every good guy signet has a bad guy signet. Like if Bodhi's signet is countering, then it seems to me the balance for that would be mimicking, right? So then that would work with the balance, assuming Bodhi is not the brother, which we'll get into. But Bodhi certainly was. If Bodhi is a Venin, Jack was a Venin first. So yeah.
True.
I don't know. Yeah, and I mean, that's still really powerful. Having a mimicking signet, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, crazy scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like not good crazy. Like,
oh no, like bad. It's like very bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I have 2 social media shout outs. Just the first one is super simple, but I think we had 3 actually milestones, right? Didn't we hit 1,000 on Instagram?
Yeah, we did.
Since our last
We're at
recording?
1,100 now. Yeah.
So yay. Thank you for following us. We hit 2,000 on TikTok, I think literally this morning.
Wow.
So thank you for following us there. And we also hit 100 subscribers on YouTube. So
I also think we've hit 200 subscribers on Spotify.
I mean,
Those
that's
are awesome.
I know that doesn't sound like crazy huge numbers, but like we thought that we didn't know it was going to happen when we started this, but we certainly did not think that thousands of people were going to tune in and care about what we had to say about this series. So thanks. That's really nice.
We love you guys. We're very thankful for everyone who's here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then my other shout out. So I wanted to talk about, we got some interesting comments this week on our post about how we think that the dragons might be lying about how signets work. TikTok is weird that way in that posts that we posted a long time ago will just like flare up suddenly and people will like have a lot of things to say on them. And I know that some of you are catching up, and so that's totally justifiable. But there was some discourse on our post about how signets work. So I'll give a summary of the discourse and then I'll talk about why I think it's interesting. So the crux of the post was we thought that the dragons were lying about how signets work because of their conversation with the Irids, in which the Irids are basically saying, you gifted your rider this, you armed yours with this, making it sound very intentional. And Riddick started to argue, like, that's not how signets work. And the Irids were like, screw this guy. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Basically just ignored him. So we thought that was fishy. Some people felt like this was hard to believe because when Violet first intentionally wielded lightning at the time of Jack's alleged death, Tairn boomed like lightning wielder, right? And most interpreted this as like a surprise declaration. But then we had some interesting responders say, well, actually, that doesn't really hold water because we later learned that Tairn knew when Violet first wielded while kissing Xaden.
Yeah.
And we learned this when Violet was learning about dreamwalking. And Andarna said, well, you didn't tell her the first time that she wielded lightning. She needed to discover it for herself. So that implies, right, that Tairn knew the first time Violet wielded lightning. It also implies that Andarna knew that Tairn knew the first time Violet wielded lightning. But Tairn didn't know when Violet wielded dreamwalking. He got mad at Andarna for not telling Violet, right? So here's what I think is interesting. It kind of furthers our theory that Irid signets are different than other den signets, and possibly furthers our theory that Irids are like a different species. Dragons can tell when their own human wields their signet, right? But so far, aside from Andarna, not other dragons' signets. So Tairn doesn't know about Xaden's intrinsic signet. It's like a whole betrayal of Sgaeyl against Tairn because she didn't tell him.
Maybe, but he does have that line that says, don't read me.
Maybe.
So I'm not 100%, but yes.
Maybe, but he gets really mad when Violet finds out about it.
He gets really mad.
Suspect, right?
Yeah.
And even so, even if he did know, like that would have been because Sgaeyl told him, not because he could tell. Tairn also doesn't know about his own rider's dreamwalking signet, which is kind of crazy. Irids, however, can detect other people's signets and abilities just by looking at them. Leothin and those Irids recognize Riddick's signet without him telling them. He's like, you got ice.
Yeah.
Violet signets. And Xaden flared up as Venin on site when the Irids were looking at him.
I love this. I think this is great. The only thing I was going to say, because I was going, spoiler alert, we're recording our dream deep dive as well today. So obviously the dreams are very fresh in my memory. And I was going to bring this up on Dream Deep Dive. I'll bring it up here too. There is a moment where Violet is waking up from a nightmare. And she says to Tairn, can you see my dreams? Yeah. And he says, I have better things to do. He doesn't say no. Yeah. But I have better things to do, right? So like, I wonder if Tairn did know that she was dreamwalking. But none of that negates what you just said, right? Like, it still means that, yeah, the Irids know people's signets. And they know whether or not they're Venom, and other dragons don't. I think you're totally right about that. Right, because it's not like Tairn was like, hey, by the way, Violet, Jack fucking Barlow is a Venom.
Right. Yeah. And if they
But
if they
shouldn't
did know,
Andarna have known?
that's where I'm going is why doesn't Andarna just like walk around like a fucking siren whenever we see a Venom?
I mean,
I
she
don't know,
was in the
maybe.
dreamless sleep for a lot of it.
So this goes further from what I think is actually true, but one other thing I thought about when thinking through this were the elders. So like the elders can detect a dragon's scale colors before they ever manifest. And they knew that Andarna was a different species. Like what if like because Andarna's I don't know.
Well, you know what? Maybe it's just she needed to be trained by the Irids, right? So
Right.
maybe it's just
Yeah.
like this is
Maybe
a
it's
skill
just
that they learn, and now she will
yeah.
be able to.
Yeah.
In which case, fucking Atos better watch the fuck out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for the discourse on that post because that led us down a fun train of thought.
This is going to be a 5-hour episode.
We have to move on. Okay. Let's dive. And consistent with our last history episode, we're going to try our best to explain the events and what we know about them before diving into theories. We know we're not always awesome about that, so we'll really try our best. Abby, would you care to tell us about the Second Krovlan Uprising?
I would love to. And I want to just preface this a bit because I know you and I were texting a bit about this weekend, and I think we've both come to this conclusion. The Second Krovlan Uprising and the Tyrrish Rebellion are now, in my mind, inextricably linked. Like, I think as we go through this episode, at least in my mind, we'll see that there are perhaps one very specific similar thread through the both of them. I don't know if you also have found this thread or not, because I think it's pretty crazy. But basically, the Second Krovlan Uprising and the Tyrrish Rebellion, there's a reason I think there's a reason Asher points Violet in this direction at this specific history event rather than say what the Signy incursion of 328 or whatever the fuck that was. So I think that's important. I think we should just keep that in mind as we
I'm
go
curious
through.
what your thread is. I'm excited. I have a thread, but I don't know if it's the same as yours.
Mine is crazy. Mine is actually
maybe it's
crazy.
not.
So
Mine
we'll
is
see.
not crazy. Okay.
It is crazy, but it's also not crazy. It's been confirmed. All right. So what we know about the Second Krovlan Uprising pretty much all comes from Asher. So basically, Deverelli brokered a deal between an unnamed Isle Kingdom and Krovla. Krovla wanted to secede from Paromiel, wasn't happy with Paromiel for whatever reason. They needed an army to do it. Deverelli brokered a deal between an unnamed Isle Kingdom and Krovla. Krovla, before we get to Violet's hypothesis, what we know is that Krovla couldn't keep their end of the bargain, whatever the bargain was between Deverelli and this unnamed Isle Kingdom. So Deverelli pulled out of the deal and the Isle Kingdoms withdrew their support. And because the word is the blood, Deverelli also sold out Krovla to the Primorish King Regent, and the Midnight Massacre occurred in which all of the Krovlish uprisers were Ronnie's doing the thumb across the neck gesture, were
Dead
slaughtered in their beds, right? So killed in their sleep, which we know even riders don't do, right? Riders won't kill other riders in their sleep, but
Right.
these guys were killed in their sleep. I think that's all we actually know.
I also do want to just talk about what we know about Krovla because I do think it's important.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, aside from the Krovlan Uprising, we learn a few things in like little smatterings about Krovla throughout the book. So, the first is the trade agreement of Resin. That was signed like 200 years ago, likely in the early 400s, that allows for the exchange of meat and lumber from Navarre for cloth and agriculture from Paromiel. And that exchange happens 4 times a year at the Athebyne outpost, which borders Krovla and Tyrrendor. There is also,
That's important.
Yes.
That's important.
That's important. Make a note. There's also the Treaty of Arif. It allows for shared airspace between Krovla and Navarre. So dragons and griffins can fly over a small strip of mountains. We're not told what strip of mountains those are, but if you look at...
It has to be the Esben.
Yeah, if you look at a map, it looks like it has to be that. Both of those things, I think, make it plausible for Krovlan citizens to exchange information and goods with Navarrian citizens, not illegally. And we also know that Krovla is governed by Viscount Tecaurs.
Yeah.
Those are my only additional, what we know.
And Corden is the capital?
Corden is the capital. Yeah,
Something.
that feels
It's
right.
an important city.
It's an important city. It's where Tecaurs lives.
Yes, and Asher makes a note, which I thought was kind of a strange note, that it was assumed that Corden supplied the troops for the Krovlan Uprising, which I thought was weird because Corden is part of Krovla. So why would that be a special note? All right. So then we get into Violet's hypothesis that we learn about in Tales and Tomes on the Isle of Deverelli with Narelle. So Violet speculates that the Isle Kingdom was promised feathertails. The way she is able to speculate this is there's 2 pieces of documentation that she uses. So first is public notice 433.323. By the way, I don't know if you guys haven't realized this, the public notices, the numbers are the years in which they're published. No one ever comes out and says that. You just kind of have to deduce it because the public notices that are epigraphs in Onyx Storm are like 633, 634. So it's the year in which they're published. So that's how we know this happened in 433. So public notice 433, but you're all very smart. I'm sure you figured that out. Public notice 433.323 acknowledges a failed border breach attempt by Krovlan forces near Athebyne 2 days before the Midnight Massacre. So the Krovlan forces were attempting to cross into Navarre at Athebyne. Keep that in mind. That's important. The journal from the commander who oversaw the interrogation said that the soldiers had crossed into Navarre to acquire tail feathers. However, as Dane and Violet realized together, again in Tales and Tomes, the raiders spoke Krovlish. In Krovlan, the descriptor follows the noun. So it's not tail feathers, it's feathertails, right? And I will also remind everyone that the definition of feathertails is a little up in the air at this moment. But let's
talk about why that is, though. That's important, right? Like, every dragon in Navarre hatches and is a golden feathertail. However, we also know that Irids...
No, they don't change their tail.
They don't change their tail. The tail remains feathered.
Right. So dragons are hatched as feathertails. I'm assuming when they go through puberty, they find out their scale color and they get to choose their tail. So the tail is up to the dragon. Irids keep their feather tails. We don't know if that's because they choose to always keep their feather tails or if this choice is not given to them. All right. So Violet assumes that this feather tail is referring to juvenile dragons. Okay, I'll go further. So sometimes I'm like, should I keep going? Should I not? More of Violet's hypothesis and speculation. I'm saying Violet's because I'm no longer sure that I 100% agree with her. On Unnbriel, when they're on Unnbriel and they are fighting Queen Marlis, and they said, Violet wins, she says, and Marlis says, okay, I'll talk to you. She says, will you fight for us? Marlis says, we want dragons. Not fully grown, of course. Your kind has let them become too headstrong, too arrogant. Bring us, say, 12 eggs, 2 of each breed, and I will bring my army to the continent. And Violet says, the Second Krovlan Uprising, Dad was right, but they weren't looking for feathertails because of their gifts. It was because they thought they were ... malleable. So Violet assumes that because Marlis said they wanted dragon eggs, that Unnbriel was the unnamed isle that Krovla made a deal with through Deverelli. I don't necessarily agree with Violet. This is
on
just
that piece, right? Like, that's what you're saying is you don't know whether they just wanted feathertails because they're malleable.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think based on the absolute hunger and reverence with which everyone has been looking at Andarna as an Irid, I think it's unlikely that that's the only reason that anyone wanted feathertails.
Right. So basically, Violet assumes that because Unnbriel is asking for dragon eggs, that they were the ones who wanted the feathertails 200 years ago. That is what we have for what we know. I have some other notes. Do you want me to go into them, or do you have anything else?
I think there's a couple important things that we know. One is that Asher intentionally taught Dane Krovlish because Violet struggled with it, implying that she would need it at some point. So this research around Krovla, it's not just an FYI, here's what happened in Krovla. It's like, you're probably going to need to figure something out in Krovlish at some point. And then I think the other piece is, like, Navarre has made a point to conceal the events of the Second Krovlan Uprising from the citizens of Navarre. So it's interesting that Asher was specifically researching it in conjunction with Feathertails, and that somehow got approved and is now very much like leadership wants it. Do they want it just to continue concealing it? I don't know. But it is interesting, right, that they might have had enough faith that someone would figure out a connection between the Krovlan Uprising and Feathertails that they wanted to hide it completely, or there's something else related to this that they wanted to hide completely. But either way, they're being super sketchy about the Second Krovlan Uprising.
Yeah, absolutely. And this just speaks back to there are many cover-ups in this series. There's not just one cover-up, there is a series of smaller cover-ups as well.
Yes.
And I was actually going back and rereading it. I was rereading this scene between Lilith and Violet on the stairs right after she's been freed from torture. Yeah. And Lilith describes it as a blanket of lies that were woven for them like centuries ago, which I was like, the imagery of that is just so interesting, right? Like it's all these little pieces that they have to keep together to keep the blanket from ripping. And obviously it doesn't work.
Right.
The other note I had is that it seems based on the timeline that the Second Krovlan Uprising is also what led to riders becoming the generals of all the armed forces. So we have a quote from Iron Flame when Auric and Violet are in the archives. Auric is, sorry, sometimes I still want to say Eric. I know you guys have given us a lot of feedback on that, so I'm trying.
I've gotten so much feedback on that one. Guys, it's ambiguous, okay? Aaron is pronounced Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron,
so
guys.
I don't want to hear your shit.
Okay, so Auric is going through all of the texts in the archives, and he's like, oh, there's journals here from like healers and scribes who were the leaders of the armed forces. And Violet says healers, infantry, or even scribes could be general of the armies until about 200 years ago with the Second Krovlan Uprising. After that, the commander of the riders commanded all of Navarre's forces. So something about the Krovlan Uprising, right, made the riders, but really the dragons, right? Because it's always really the dragons say, hey, cut the bullshit. We can't do this anymore. We have to be in charge. Is that because they were trying to steal feathertails and dragons will do anything to protect their young? Could be. We don't really know. That's just speculation. That looks like a nice matcha.
I made this matcha before this and I was so proud of it. And I actually planned to show you in our intro and then I forgot. So here's my beautiful matcha for anybody who's watching video. Yeah, I didn't even process that, but that's super interesting.
Right. So something about this put riders in charge of everyone. It is interesting. All right, do we want to get into theories?
Let's do theories. Yeah, go
All
ahead.
Right, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
I mean, I can start with the first one because I don't have anything terribly exciting on it, and you probably have something more hard-hitting. So it's like speculation on the unnamed isle. I think we're led to believe this is Unnbriel for the reasons that you just outlined, right? Like Queen Marlies very much says, I want dragons. And I think that is the most likely answer. However, I think she also reveals something important when she says that. When she's asked her price to ally with Tyrrendor, she says the same thing everyone else in the Isles craves. So I think we can safely assume this is something that quite a few are after and not shy about, given she knows that. Like the people in Zahilna look at the dragons with reverence. So does Talia and her children on Hedotus. Like, the Isles all want dragons. And so while I agree that Unnbriel is the most likely, I don't actually know that Unnbriel is definitively it. I don't think we can rule the others out.
So I think I have to start with speculation for dealing in dragons because it kind of leads to my...
Okay.
So why Athebyne? Why would you go into Navarre through Athebyne? You have to go to Tyrrendor. And then you have to scale the cliffs of Draelor, which we got many scenes about, lots of exposition.
We're going the same place.
Really hard to scale the cliffs of Draelor. Why would you go into Navarre through Athebyne? There's plenty of entrances on the Esben Mountains. There's plenty of outposts. Like Krovla has a long border. We can pull up the map if we want. Why would you go through Athebyne? It's to get to the Vale, right? Sorry, I should add. You're trying to get to the Vale. That's where the dragons are. That's where we've been told the dragons are, right? Okay. Went back and I was rereading the beginning of Iron Flame because of some theories about Brennan that we have. Violet says, how did you survive after being shot by an arrow, basically? And I read this line the first time and I thought nothing of it. And I read this line this time and I went, holy fuck, what the fuck? Brennan, there are other dragons here and they saved us. Hit us in the network of caves within the valley, then later with the civilians who survived the city being torched. Other dragons?
The Aretian Empyrean is not new.
The Aretian Empyrean has been here the whole time.
Correct.
The whole time.
In caves.
Who are these dragons? Who are they? Are they only black dragons? Like, what the fuck is going on here? I have chills. Yes. Okay. So there's a secret dragon den in Aretia, guys. Like, it's not just the Doomaboid line or whatever that Taryn and Kodag are descended from. It might be them, but I was certainly led to believe that all dragons went to the Vale for the unification. Not these dragons. And Krovla knows about them. And thought that they could take feathertails for whatever reason from the dragons in Tyrrendor. It's the only thing that makes sense. It does not make sense to try to get all the way to the Vale via Tyrrendor. Right.
So I have one counter to that, which was the first theory that I originally came up with based on the trade agreement at Ressen. So this gets into like how potentially the Tyrrish Rebellion and the Krovlan Uprising can be linked. You once asked on this podcast why Tyrrendor would agree to unify with Navarre. I had assumed that dragons had to be the answer, right? The Vale is in the heart of the territories that agreed to unify with Navarre. Without dragons, Tyrrendor has leverage because they have Palladium, but they have no army to defend themselves, aside from infantry who could be scorched in seconds because they don't have flyers there. I think there's a theme here, which it's not fancy, it's just simple military tactics. Like, everyone wants dragons because dragons are the strongest unit of an army, any army, right? Why go through Athebyne? I don't know how you actually pronounce that, to be honest with you. Tyrrendor and Krovla are meeting at that outpost 4 times a year. What if Tyrrendor was helping Krovla?
Yeah. Okay, that's my other theory, that Tyrrendor was never actually part of Navarre. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And I get into this more in the Tyrrish Rebellion.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah.
But I think it's important, right? Like, Tyrrendor is on the border. Like, they could have family on either side. They could have allegiances on either side. Like, what if Athebyne, God, I don't know.
You say it your way, I'll say it my way. People will let us know.
What if Athebyne was just the place they thought they could get in with Tyrrish support?
I think that's also possible. And this is why I'm saying, in my mind, these two events are now inextricably linked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I think no matter what, Tyrrendor was working closely with Krovla here, right? Like, I don't think there's any way around that.
Well, is that still true if they're trying to steal the hatchlings of this, like, secret Aretian riot, right?
I don't know.
That would be an offense against Tyrrendor. So I actually think, like, whichever way this actually went determines whether Krovla and Tyrrendor have been in cahoots. And there's totally the possibility that that's nuanced, right? Like, anytime you have a trade agreement, like, you could have people, like, covertly sharing information and then other people, like, we're, like, sticking to the law type thing. But I don't necessarily think that both mean that Tyrrendor was, like, objectively helping Krovla.
I guess that's true. I'd have to think about it more. And this is why in my mind I'm saying these two events are inextricably linked, right? Because I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but with the Tyrrish Rebellion. Kat and Xaden being engaged.
Mm-hmm.
The more I think about it, I'm like, that is so weird. Like, Fen just engaged his son to an enemy princess, basically, right? Like, and it's not like Fen is the king of Navarre and is trying to form an alliance, right? Like,
but that happened during the rebellion.
This happens during the rebellion. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But this is kind of what leads to me thinking that the roots between Tyrrendor and Krovla go deep, and that Tyrrendor was always actually closer aligned with Krovla than with Navarre, because that's not even like. It's not even like seen as an act of war, kind of. I don't know. Like, it's just crazy for this engagement to, like, exist in my mind.
I think it was seen like Paromial and Navarre were at war. So the fact that they were engaged was like a blatant act of rebellion. Like, they never could have arranged that with Navarre's approval.
The engagement does not end when the rebellion fails. Like, the engagement stays, which I think is, like, that's kind of crazy. Like, that's wild. Anyway. We can get back to Krovla. So unnamed Isle could be Unnbriel. Could be Unnbriel. I don't think it can be Hedotus. I don't think it can be Zahilna, because Zahilna is so driven by luck. I just don't really see them making this kind of deal, right?
Yeah, like being strategic.
Yeah.
And we don't think it's Deverelli because Deverelli's the broker.
Loisum still on the table. Yeah. We just don't know anything about them.
Don't know anything about Loisum.
Yeah. I think I have to get to my precog theory now. I think I have to keep going.
Okay.
Sorry, my precog corner theory. Early. Sometimes you do it early. Please forgive me.
Sometimes we do it early.
All right. We mentioned this before. Feathertails. Do feathertails mean juvenile dragons, or do they mean Irids, right? So I made a couple notes about this, and I made notes based on kind of what the general consensus about feathertails seems to be across the books, right? So, like, when we are talking about feathertails in general, are we talking about Irids, or are we talking about juvenile dragons? Mm-hmm. So, first one, feathertail dragons are the breed we know the least about. Breed. Mm-hmm. That's Irids. That points to Irids, right? Okay. This is because feathertails reportedly abhor violence and are not suitable for bonding. Irids. Though this scholar cannot be certain, as one has never left the Vale within my lifetime. That could go towards Irids or towards juvenile dragons. Feathertails shouldn't bond because they can accidentally gift their powers to humans. So again, we're getting to the gifting of the powers. which to me means we could be talking about Irids as well. Feathertails don't bond because their power is too unpredictable, unstable. Terrence says this could be Irids or this could be juvenile dragons. And then Atos, so this is all kind of knowledge that Violet is reciting, knowledge that Violet knows from her father. This is just like common knowledge about Feathertails. And then Atos says, which is funny because I remember your father doing a bit of research about the Second Krovlan Uprising, and he mentioned something about Feathertails, but can't seem to find that tome. Okay, based on everything we know about what Asher did, going to the Isles, and Darna being silent about, I know nothing about your father's research, really seems to me Feathertails here means Irids, does not mean juvenile dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Xaden says, do you think there is a den hidden on the continent somewhere? Is the Aretian riot our secret Irid den? I think that would be crazy.
Here.
Yeah.
The other dragons that saved Brennan, basically.
Are the other dragons that saved Brennan Irids, right? And here's the thing, would Brennan even necessarily know? Because they can change color. The only tell is the feather tail, right? So like Brennan might not even know. Xaden references that this might be Irids. I think that the Krovlan Uprising was actually looking for Irids, not for juvenile dragons, right? That's what I'm saying here. Like, I think these feather tails are Irids. I think they were looking for Irids, which doesn't necessarily mean they were trying to kidnap them. They could have just trying to convince them to come with them, right?
Yeah, which then would make Athebyne make sense, right? If they thought that, if they had reason to believe that the secret Irid den was hiding in Tyrrendor, could they be linked to Teladium?
I had the same note. I couldn't find anything. Like definite on that, but that is kind of my current working theory, that this secret dragon den, first mind blown with secret dragon den.
Yes.
But are they the secret Irid den? Because it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense when you think about it for an unnamed isle to want dragons. Dragons can't access magic on the isles, right?
Yeah.
So
we still don't know what would happen if they establish hatching grounds there, but yes. Yeah.
I think we should assume the general knowledge should be that dragons can't access magic on the isles, except for Irids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
who just are magic,
right? So I think these Irids, I think the Feathertails are Irids. I think there's a chance there's a secret Irid den in Aretia. I definitely think there's a secret dragon den in Aretia no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's my dissertation on this. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. The question is, of course, if there is a secret Irid den, we have to assume Xaden didn't know. We have to.
I also just think it's interesting that, like, so I got to the same passage you did with Brennan saying, like, there are other dragons here. They helped me. They saved me. And they were in caves.
Right. Hidden.
And Andarna's not fond of pits.
Andarna's not fond of pits. Yeah.
I also just feel like that network of caves is going to come back into play, even though I think we were maybe already in it with Solus.
Was that there? Oh, yeah, that was there.
It was definitely in a network of caves somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good one. So, the secret dragon den in Aretia. First of all, like, Aretia has had dragons, which is noteworthy. Or maybe not Aretia. Maybe that's like a misnomer. It was somewhere in Tyrrendor, though, I think. Tyrrendor has had dragons.
Right, so in conclusion, I do feel like we were all over the place. So let's just wrap up our theory.
Yeah.
Krovlan Uprising, they went to Athebyne because they knew there was a secret dragon den in Tyrrendor. Those are the dragons they were going after, not the dragons in the Vale. They may or may not have been looking for Irids rather than juvenile dragons. We are not convinced that the unnamed isle was Unnbriel.
Yeah. An alternate theory is just like, are Tyrrendor and Krovla allies, and Tyrrendor was planning to help Krovla break in and get to the Vale.
Yes.
Don't know.
Either of those work.
Simpler.
Either of those work.
Less crazy theory.
I guess my thing is, if Krovla and Tyrrendor were allies on this, why, like, Krovla wouldn't have gotten caught at Athebyne? Maybe, unless Tyrrendor was split in some way.
Yeah. But, like, Tyrrendor also has every reason to want dragons for themselves. Like, if Tyrrendor had dragons, like, had a hatching ground that wasn't in Sgaeyl, like, why are they part of Navarre?
Why would they have lost the rebellion, though?
Right.
Because they're Irids, because they don't fight. Anyway.
Much to think about. Okay, anything else on the Second Krovlan Uprising? I mean, I think it's interesting that this is the Second Krovlan Uprising. What was the first?
Yeah, and why are people upset with Paramish leadership?
On that note, let's talk about the Tyrrish Rebellion, aka the Apostasy, aka the Secession. Lots of names for this event. So I'll just give an overview and do my best to be concise yet detailed on what we actually know about the Tyrrish Rebellion for sure. So the Tyrrish Rebellion started somewhere around 627 to 628 AU, roughly 5 years before the start of Fourth Wing. The only thing we really know about the start of the rebellion for sure is that Fen tried to declare Tyrrish independence, and the first thing he did was find allies, the first of whom was Viscount Tecaurs of Krovla.
It comes back.
It comes back. The rebellion lasted a little less than a year, which is quite short, and we know that Tyrrendor almost won. The only indication that we're given as to why they almost won was Tyrrendor's actual geographical positioning near the cliffs of Draelor, which is over 1,000-foot drop. Aretia, for those who just pull up the map of the Empyrean series, Aretia is positioned between the mountain range that sits between Aretia and Basgayath, and the cliffs drop off is between them and the border of Navarre. So Aretia is actually like super well positioned for conflict, especially if you have dragons and other people don't. The battle in which Brennan, quote, died by Fen shooting him in the chest with an arrow was likely, I say likely because we don't know for sure, but we're kind of given a lot of clues that this was likely the last battle of the Tyrrish Rebellion, since Brennan was then taken to the caves to wait until Navarre burned down Aretia. We also know that Tern was a big part of why Navarre won against the Tyrrish, per Kaori, which is interesting seeing as the side that he's shaken out on now is like the side of Tyrrendor, right?
I have one note about that. And again, I'm going to shout out our friends, Faithfully Fantasy. They pointed this out. I'm not sure I agree with them, but Rebecca worded that very, very tricksily. So she never says that Tern is fighting for Navarre.
She didn't, yeah.
Yeah.
She said like, yeah.
Right, yeah. So yes. I don't have the exact quote, but it's basically we would have lost without him. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Tern was fighting for Navarre. It could mean that he did something stupid. I don't know. I don't know, but he could have been fighting for Tyrrendor. We don't know anything about Naolin. Naolin could have been Tyrrish, you know?
I think it's highly likely that Navarre perceived Tern to be fighting for Navarre, but you're right. Like, we don't know what was going on in Naolin's head. We can assume that, like, given Brennan was perceived to be on the side of Navarre and Naolin was clearly, like, Brennan was important to Naolin and Naolin saved him, like, they probably look like they're fighting for Navarre. But could Tern have been on the side of Tyrrendor this entire time and just posing as Navarre? Exactly like he's been for the first half of this series? Totally. Totally think that's reasonable. So Tern was a big part of why Navarre won. Unclear which side he was fighting for. And it's also interesting because we know that his rider Naolin allegedly died saving Brennan's life in that supposed last battle. So the rebellion ended. We don't know a ton about like what led to the capture. We don't know like what Tern really did that ended the rebellion, right? We don't know that. So I'm not going to say it now, but we're going to theorize on it. Rest assured. The rebellion ended with the separatists' capture and execution by Dragonfire. And the children of the separatists were forced to watch their parents die. These executions we know happened in Chaldir, which is where the royal family lives, where King Tauri and his family lives. And we know that Lilith didn't think the kids should have been there, but we know that she oversaw the executions. We also know that there may have been other private executions, and we know this because Liam's father, Isaac Myeri, was executed in private in their family home and was not on the death roll from the Chaldir executions. So we don't know how many of those there were, but we know that there was one. And the children of the executed were given runes by Liam's mother that blossomed into rebellion relics on their skin once their parents were executed by Kodag, who is General Melgren's dragon. And that rebellion relic protects them from the signet of the dragon that killed their parents.
And it also seems like there was a propaganda spin about those relics, right? Because
totally.
Yeah, what Violet understands at the beginning of Fourth Wing is that those relics were actually given to them by Kodag to mark them as the children of the rebellion leaders. But then we find out that actually they had no idea that was going to happen. This was all General Myeri.
So I think what we are told, and I believe this to be true, is that Liam's mother created these runes that the kids had at the time of the execution. And once General Melgren's dragon, Kodak, had executed their parents, this rune caused the rebellion relic to blossom and then protected them from General Melgren's signet, actually. Okay, so one could argue that Navarrian leadership just like saw whatever that happened and thought, okay, and maybe Kodag said this, like maybe Kodag lied, said, okay, like Kodag gave them those relics because like we don't know what made them, gave them those relics, and now we know that they're evil and that they're the children of separatists and we'll never forget. type of thing. I find that very hard to believe. Like, I think Navarrian leadership probably knew that some sort of rune or something caused those relics to blossom. But you could spin a theory in which Kodag was like, hey, Melgren, like, I did this, and now these kids have these relics, and now you'll always know that they're separatist children, and they're marked and bad.
Another interesting thing I just thought of, I don't know if you remember this, but Liam says the youngest child of a rebellion leader was born with a rebellion relic. Yeah. Which I think is fascinating in terms of like the power of runes. Or it was a Rebecca oopsie and she hadn't quite figured this out yet. But like, will their children continue to be born with this relic? Like, is this going to shield Tyrrendor forever, basically?
So just to round out, right, their parents were executed. The children were given these runes by Liam's mother. Those blossomed into rebellion relics on their skin and protected them from the signet of the dragon, the signet of the rider of the dragon that murdered their parents. Which is crazy work by Liam's mom. Like, MVP of runes. She should have been teaching runes this whole time.
Yeah.
Once their parents were dead, the children were sent to various nobles to be fostered until they could be conscripted into the Rider Squadron. And we know that siblings were separated. Like, we don't have a ton of rhyme or reason as to why anyone was sent to any specific foster parent, but we do know that it sounds like it was probably strategic because Liam and his sister didn't even go to the same one. So, unclear.
Yeah. Some kind of strategy. I would argue that raising Xaden and Liam together is a terrible idea if you're Navarre.
For them. Totally agree. Anything I missed on history of the Tyrrish Rebellion?
Yeah. Two things, I think. So I have two quotes here. Some Tyrrish riders remained loyal to Navarre. They were promoted, and the riders who turned against king and country were killed or executed. So I think that speaks to our split that we were talking about potentially earlier with the Second Krovlan Uprising, that Tyrrendor is not necessarily a fully united front. I think Aura Binehaven, or whatever the fuck her name was, I think she was... Yeah, fuck her. I think she was Tyrrish, but not part of the rebellion. Someone in Fourth Wing was Tyrrish, but wasn't part of the rebellion. I don't remember if it was her. Sorry if I'm besmirching her terrible name. And I think it's whenever we talk about riders being executed, I'm like, okay, so then what happens to their dragons, right? Because we know
changed names and found the children, obviously.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Question answered. Never mind. But yes, I mean, I think we should think about that. We know that Fen wasn't a rider, but I don't think we know about General Mayuri. She might have been a rider. You know, I think, Anyway, so what happened to those dragons?
You brought up such an important point. If Liam's mom weaved these runes, she was either a rider or a flyer, based on what we know about runes right now. She had to be.
Except maybe not. Okay. Well, I forgot that I actually have a really crazy pre-crowd corner theory.
Okay. Keep going. I have a couple of
my other note. There, Brennan at one point says, "We learn from Fen's mistakes. We're not attacking Navarre like he did or declaring independence. We're fighting right under their noses and we have a plan." So Fen attacked Navarre, which I think is interesting. And I think is a bad fucking move on his part. But
seriously.
Maybe if he felt that he had the might of a secret dragon den, that he could take on Navarre. I don't know.
Maybe.
Clearly I think it's just, we need to keep in mind, clearly some dragons fought for Tyrrendor in this rebellion. And where are they now?
Yep. Agree. I left out two important points. One, just like the whole classified treaty addenda piece. So like there's a bunch of stuff that went into this like post-rebellion addenda to allow these kids to live that we might still not know a lot about, but we knew that the children of the separatists had to go into the Rider Squadron. We know that Xaden personally took responsibility of all 107 lives of those children. And then the last thing that gets into theory, but I'll just like leave it here and then we can talk about it. We talked about this on a prior episode, but I'm bringing it back because I think it matters. Right before the rebellion is when everyone started imbuing the alloy that's used in daggers to kill venin. And just to remind everyone, the reason that we know that is when Xaden is preparing a weapon, Violet's asking, like, have we always done this with daggers? And he said, no, this started right before the rebellion. My guess is Melgren had a vision of how an upcoming battle is going to go, and these were central to his victory. Once Sgaeyl chose me at threshing, we started to work to smuggle out a few daggers at a time to supply what drifts we could make friendly contact with. So that started right before the rebellion.
Yes. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Lilith Sorrengail, Mama Sorrengail. I never even really thought about this. She captured Fen. We know she captured Fen. Garrick has a line in Fourth Wing that she not only captured Fen, she captured almost all of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible? How could one person capture all of the leadership of the rebellion, right? I think we'll get back to that in theories, but that's just something to keep in mind. She became the general of Sgaeyl after the Tyrrish Rebellion. Whether that was as a reward for her performance in the Tyrrish Rebellion or whether she asked for that position, we don't know. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had. You wanna get into theories?
Let's get into theory.
Theory music.
Okay. Do you want to start with why we think the Tyrrish Rebellion started?
I don't have a crazy theory on this one. I mean, I just have the theory that seems to be where we're leading, which is that the Venin are getting more powerful. And this is actually about the Venin. We have the quote: in his last days of interrogation, Fen Riorson lost touch with reality. Railing against the kingdom of Navarre, he accused King Tyrrish and all who came before him of a conspiracy so vast, so unspeakable, that it does not bear repeating by this historian. The execution was swift and merciful for a madman who cost untold lives. And we know that there was a conspiracy so vast and so unspeakable that it does bear repeating, right? So, like, it's just, I don't think this is crazy. I think it's that the Venin are getting more powerful. Peromiel, who we know Tyrrendor might be secretly allied with, is suffering. Fen wants to help Peromiel. He can't do that while he's still in part of Navarre. Tyrrendor on its own could help Peromiel, right? We don't need Navarre. So I think they were like, okay, you know, enough of being allied with this king that we don't give two fucks about. We're done. We're on our own. And then we know the last words of Fen Riorson, where you're all cowards. I do think it's interesting that they're redacted. I don't know if that means that people weren't allowed to know that these were the last words of Fen Riorson, or if there is part of this quote that we're not getting. Like, at first I read it and I thought it was, oh, he probably said you're all fucking cowards, and that was what was redacted, but I don't know.
We just censored it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
What's also interesting is the last words of, I don't know how to say her name, but I think it's Trisilla Cardulo, Imogen's mother, are also redacted. So obviously Navarre.
I think they tried to use their last words to like get into whatever the scribes were recording, like something that could share why all of this happened, and the scribes just cut them out.
I agree. I assume that Fen wanted to open the borders and allow Peromish citizens in to Tyrrendor to help them, to protect them. We know that Tyrrendor is much easier to protect than Peromiel, and it's just farther from the barons. And we know we have the map at the beginning of Iron Flame that implies that the Venin Rising is what I'm calling it, is not that new. The red flags are all from the last few years and the orange are the last few months. So this has been happening. It's not like this is starting when Violet finds out about it, right? This has been going on for years.
Yeah.
I could not find any evidence of it being about something else. So that's what I think it's about.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I took a slightly more emotional twist on it. Like, I do think the cause of the Tyrrish Rebellion dates back to 400 years ago, like when Peromiel and Navarre went to war. Like, Tyrrendor is on the border of Peromiel and Navarre, making it possible. Like, I wouldn't even say possible. I would say likely that Tyrrish citizens have family on both sides of the border. And, like, to your point, Venin rise, start attacking Peromiel. Tyrrendor was divided over the conflict, driven by a desire to protect Peromiel. We didn't start seeing that Palladium could help until right before the rebellion, right? Like, we just started imbuing Palladium and using it to kill Venin right before the rebellion started.
So I thought the alloy has existed for a very long time, but it only started getting put in daggers right before the rebellion.
Agree. But those daggers
you're saying
are the weapons.
You still couldn't use it to kill Venin.
I don't think
unless it was a dagger.
Unless it was imbued.
Okay, I like it.
So I think when the alloy when they started realizing, okay, we can imbue this alloy, I think that's the straw that broke the camel's back. I think it's all the things that you mentioned, but the straw that broke the camel's back is Tyrrendor is seeing, hey, these daggers are being created, this alloy is getting imbued, and now it can both extend our wards and kill Venin. And Navarre was like, we're going to hoard this all and use it to extend our wards. And Tyrrendor was like, we could be saving people with this.
It's the daggers. Those damn daggers.
It could be the daggers. That could have been, like, again, I think there was plenty of reason aside from the daggers to lead to this rebellion, but I think the daggers were the instigator because Tyrrendor was the primary source for what was built in them.
So how the fuck was Peromio killing Venin before the daggers? Or were they not? Did the Venin rising and the daggers kind of happen in tandem?
Or maybe they had ways of using the alloy to be like basically preventive. Like they got creative. We know that Tecaurs had like drained stones
Yeah.
that he was using to like keep Venin at bay. So I do believe there were other ways to
And
at
we
least,
know they
like,
have
back Venin.
the ruined chest, and we know they've done a study on Venin. So clearly they have ways of containing the Venin.
And they tried poisons and dragon
And
fire.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think they were working for a long time to find all of the possible ways that they could. Navarre starts imbuing this alloy and they were like, we can use this.
Which really shows you how fucking shitty Navarre is, right? Because the
Yeah.
Venin weren't even a problem for them. They make a weapon
Messed
that can
up.
kill the Venin, and they still won't give it to Peromio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm Tyrrendor in this situation and I'm seeing what's happening like right over the border to my family, to my cousins, and Navarre is like, you can't give the aid that you want to give because we're going to use this to extend our wards and defend ourselves, I too would rebel.
I certainly would rebel.
Messed up.
Yes.
So that's how I think the rebellion started.
I basically, my notes for what actually happened gets into the connection between Tyrrendor and dragons is what I have titled this on my notes page, because we talked about how there's a secret a secret dragon den that may not be Eris in Aretia. We know Aretia is the ancestral hatching grounds for Terran and Coda. We know Brennan said there are other dragons here, right? We also can infer that Tyrrendor was a kingdom that held dragons in very high regard before the unification. And the reason we can do that is because there is a dragon on the throne. There's a dragon carved into the throne of Tyrrendor, right? So no matter what, this was the kingdom that knew about dragons, probably had positive association with dragons, maybe were dragon riders, but if they were Irids, then we're probably not dragon riders, but still probably associated with the dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Runes are a Tyrrish custom, right? So we actually got a lot on social media about, I posted a clip about how the fuck did the dragons know about runes if no one had ever bonded with a dragon to create a rune. And a lot of people were like, well, maybe the Flyers knew about them first. Maybe the Flyers knew. They're a Tyrrish custom. We're told they're a Tyrrish custom. Kat and Marin are naturally gifted at doing runes, but they don't know about the runes until Violet and everyone finds out. The people who know about them are Imogen and Bodhi and Garrick and Zeta. Right? Yep. So they're Tyrrish custom. Yeah. So now we're talking about dragons, a dragon den, and we are talking about runes. You mentioned before that Colonel Mayuri had to be a dragon rider in order to be able to wield the magic that had runes. But I'm getting back to your kind of theory originally that all magic might originate from Irids, right? So if these are
I'm just
Irids,
getting stronger on that theory over time goes on, by the way.
If these are Irids, if they're not bonded, if these are riders that are not bonded to dragons, and I apologize, everyone, I feel like we're way off the deep end on this one, but like I'm trying to figure out a world in which we are told that the first six are the first six riders who bonded dragons. We are told that runes predated that. So humans had to have had access to magic somehow before they bonded dragons. And we are now told there's a secret den in Aretia of dragons, but that they weren't bonded to humans because the first six were the first six, right? So like if these are Irids, does that mean that like Tyrrendor is basically just imbued with magic that humans can access on their own, like sky magic, right? Ground magic, because the Irids have the access to the sky magic. So like is Tyrrendor just kind of like a bastion utopia for dragon riders and humans before it gets all corrupted and fucked up by the six, where humans have access to magic, dragons have access to magic, but there are no Venin and no one's fucked up? I see you laughing at me.
Okay, I want to get back to the Tyrrish Rebellion in a second, but I do think, like, to your point on runes and, like, how they could be powered, like, we know that runes are woven and tempered with power. So, like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that some other source could not provide the power.
Well, Violet says she's tempted to pluck strings from the sky and weave runes, right?
Yeah. So I don't, yeah, I agree with you. I'm saying I agree with you. Like, I think the runes do not necessarily, like, in my mind, need to be woven by somebody who can actually temper the power themselves. Like, maybe the power can come from another place.
Or maybe
But what does this have to do with what actually happened in the Tyrrish Rebellion?
Because my theory is that this was actually, yes, it could be have driven by like a desire to protect Goromiel, but maybe it's actually driven by a desire to protect these dragons. Like
The Irids.
If they're Irids, even if they're not Irids.
Or they're whatever, they're Empyrean, they're Riot.
Yes. They're like, fuck, the Venin are coming. We know they're going to come here first. They came here first last time with the Battle of Gianfar. We know they're going to come for the Teladium, right? We know that they're going to come for Aretia. Playtime's over. We have to protect ourselves, basically. That's a theory I have. Oh, remember when I just said I don't have any theories about other than the Venin? It is about the Venin, but it's more about protecting these dragons. And the dragons basically saying it's time to secede, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that the dragons are always the ones who are really in charge. So that's how this all weaves back.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Because I think like the piece that gets interesting there for me, if it is like we're trying to protect our dragons situation, is that Tyrrish citizens are also riders for Navarre, right? Like they also go to Basgaeth. So then you're talking about the Empyrean actually knowing, or members of the Empyrean, who are the riders or the dragons of these riders from Tyrrendor, actually knowing about these other dragons.
But they do, because Marb knows.
Well, now Marb knows, but did Marb always know?
I don't know, but they know now.
Right, they know now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said it's interesting. It is interesting.
Waiting for you to tell me that I'm completely fucking crazy and that there's no way that this is real.
I just think, so Abby has this tendency of learning one thing and then it becomes the basis of the entire rest of the episode. It makes for a good episode, but I have like, my theories are much like more straightforward is maybe the way I would describe them.
Yeah, I'm crazy. But I think I cited a couple of things here. There are dragons here. There were runes.
Yeah.
Violet has
not
magic from the sky.
Not unrealistic at all.
Yes, I would say that is the way I theorize. One crazy line, and then I go off a deep end.
I love it.
Anyway, I have one more thing. We know that Fen hates riders. We know that the Irids also are not a fan of riders or signets in general. And gifting.
Yeah. Two peas in a pod. Riders. Those two.
Yeah. That just, now I have two lines to support my Irid theory.
I'm not saying you have no support. I'm saying, like, I want to go back to the basics. Like, what the heck happened with Taryn?
Sorry, guys. Even I know when I'm going too far. Maybe I don't. All right.
It's good. Oh, we're an hour and a half in. Perfect.
Okay, what actually happened?
I combined this with theories on various key players. So is it okay if I talk about both of those?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So the first key players that I wanted to talk about were Taryn and Sgaeyl. And I say Taryn and Sgaeyl because I just assumed that Sgaeyl was around, even though I think we have good reason to believe she wasn't bonded at this time, because the second rider that she bonded to was Zayden's grandfather who didn't make it out of the quadrant, and she hadn't bonded Zayden yet. So we know that Taryn is the reason the rebellion ended, and we now know that he's a member of both the rebellion and the Aretian riot. I don't know which side he was on before, or whether losing his rider to the Tyrrish Rebellion drove him to the other side, but I do think it's interesting that Sgaeyl hates Brennan. And it made me think, like, why does she specifically hate him so much? But Taryn doesn't seem to harbor the same resentment. And I don't have an answer on this. I just think it's interesting, right? Like, to me, it would make sense if Taryn hated Brennan. That would be like the equivalent of how he would feel about Zayden if Violet gave her life for his, right? Like, he would be like, fuck this guy. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he already kind of is like, actually fuck Zayden because he's a danger to my rider, to Violet. Like, imagine how he would feel about Brennan if Naolin gave up his life for Brennan or his humanity. But why Sgaeyl? If this is an indefensive Taryn situation, or if it's something more, like, I think this actually just furthers Naolin as Venin theory. Like, Sgaeyl resenting Naolin's actions because of what they did to Taryn. Like, Taryn, if Naolin turned, Taryn's not going to resent Brennan for that. He's going to resent Naolin.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I have a different...
Okay, what's your theory?
I have a different one. I think they're both valid. We should talk about both of them. We know that Sgaeyl's first rider was a Riorson. Sorry. We know that Sgaeyl's second rider was a Riorson. We know that Sgaeyl's third rider was a Riorson, whatever. What if Sgaeyl has decided that, like, she is the keeper of the Riorson line, basically, right? Like she is the guardian of the Riorson line. And Lilith is the one who executed Fen, right? And Brennan, but that doesn't work because she doesn't hate Violet.
She certainly wasn't keen on Violet. Violet was an acquired taste for her. She calls her a tumor. She does. That's why I love Sgaeyl. She's my favorite dragon.
She does.
Violet, because in that passage where Brennan's like, she just hates me, she always has. Violet's like, she hates everyone. Like, I'm growing on her. And she goes, like a tumor.
Yeah, that's so true. That is true.
So maybe it is related to Lilith. That's a good point.
It could be. But now that I think about it, I think Brennan says she has always hated me. But how long could Brennan have known Sgaeyl? Why would Brennan would not have known Sgaeyl before Sgaeyl bonded with Xaden? So that doesn't really so it does work. Like she's always hated me. That could only be 5 years old, right? Yeah. Because Sgaeyl and Brennan would not have come into contact before that.
It has to be related to what I think that means. It has to be related to what happened at the end of the Tyrrish Rebellion, because Brennan has only known Sgaeyl since that. I
think you're right. Yeah. Either resenting Brennan because Naolin turned Venom, or because of a thing. I also just thought how sad for Sgaeyl if she watched Taryn go through this with Naolin, and now
she's going through it.
Yeah, with Xaden. So sad.
And Taryn hates Xaden, so it kind of works.
Yeah, right. Maybe it's more about that. It's about that pain that they each know their mate is going through because the person that they trusted is not trustworthy.
Yeah. Yep. Which brings me to Naolin. Like, in my opinion, I now have as ironclad of the theory as I could possibly have on why Naolin has to be Venom. Why are we so convinced that Lilith isn't Venom?
Because of how she died.
If Naolin actually died of being drained, who would be dead?
Brennan.
Taryn. Taryn would be dead. We know that Taryn almost died.
Well, yeah.
I think it's because Naolin drew so much before finally turning to the source that he almost drained Taryn.
He almost drained Taryn. Right. Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. I don't have much to say about that because you have just convinced me.
And maybe maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe there's my precog corner theory, which we could get to now if we feel like it, is about siphons and how they work. But like, I just don't see how Taryn could be alive if Naolin, like, so the only thing that I'll argue with myself on a little bit here is that we know that there's a difference between draining and burnout, right? Like, burnout is like you take too much power and you let it burn you out.
Yeah.
And draining is like you run out of power and you drain your dragon too. I had assumed that because Naolin was siphoning something or someone to save Brennan, that's the only thing he can do, right? That he died of draining. But maybe he died of burnout, in which case this does not hold water.
No, I think you're right. Right. We should have been, Lilith's death is the blueprint here, right? Yeah, kind of. Because, really, Sloane helps be the blueprint. But, yeah. Taryn almost died, not out of grief. Taryn almost died because Naolin channeled all of Taryn's power.
Yeah, or maybe close to all of it. Like, we also don't know who Naolin was siphoning from. Like, if he was siphoning from Taryn, okay, who else was there that he could have siphoned from? Again, like, Brennan's death, like, we got lots of thoughts on it, or I have lots of thoughts on why it doesn't work the way that we've been told.
Well, who else was there? I mean, what if Lilith was there? What if that's how she knows it's going to work with Sloane because it worked before? No, but Lilith doesn't know Brennan's life. Don't listen to me.
We know that Fen was there, obviously.
Yeah.
And I don't think we are told anybody else confirmed.
But we still have the unanswered question of the bond of Taryn and Naolin's bond.
And Naolin, yeah, and like what the heck happened there? Yeah, I don't know.
There's really there's 3 options as far as I can see it, right? Yeah. Venom can break bonds because Theophany says you can keep your dragons, not you have to keep your dragons. Right. That's option number 1. Venom can just break the bonds. Those bonds specifically. Option number 2, Secret Irid Den broke the bonds. I don't think that's it because Taryn would fucking know about the Irids in that case.
We've also had this theory since like lunch. Secret Irid Den.
Or option 3, which in my mind is the most intriguing option. Taryn is still bonded to Naolin.
Yeah.
There are periods where he is just unaccounted for. Where Violet's like, are you going to come help me? And he's like, do you need help? Like, can you do this on your own?
Yeah. And if that's the case, like, I totally think that's who he was bonded to for those 5 years. Also, so who was Naolin fighting for? I think, and I'm open to rebuttal here, but I think Naolin had to be either for the Tyrrish or a double agent. And the reason that I think that is, if all of that went down, Taryn would have seen everything that went down, seen Fen shoot Brennan, Naolin lose his life or his soul, whichever happened, to Brennan, and he would have been like, fuck the Tyrrish, I will kill them all. But he wasn't. And Sgaeyl then went and bonded Xaden. So did Naolin also turn for love? Is he either pro-Tyrrish from outside of Navarre or within Navarre? Like, is he a double agent? Where's he at? Is Xaden about to go find him? Like, I don't know.
Okay, wait, hold on. Walk me through it.
So I think Naolin had to be sympathetic to the Tyrrish in some regard, or like Taryn changed his mind at some point. Because if I'm Taryn and my rider just gives his life for somebody who was shot by the leader of the Tyrrish Rebellion, if I'm Taryn, I'm like, fuck Tyrrendor. Like, I will kill you all, and Navarre is right to not help you and to shut you down. But he wasn't. And Sgaeyl then went and bonded Xaden, and they were mates at that point. And so
Okay. Yeah.
I think Naolin had to be sympathetic to Tyrrendor somehow, in some regard. Or Taryn was around, like, with Marb when Brennan
Well,
was
and
taken
that's
in.
that is a stronger argument for Brennan becoming sympathetic to Tyrrendor as well, right? Because, like, if Naolin gave his life fighting for Tyrrendor, right, then Brennan might be like, okay, this is a cause that the person, I'm going to say loved, I'm assuming they were in love, the person I loved died for, right? Then I think that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Rather than fuck you, Fen Riorson, I don't want to have anything to do with you. You fucking shot me with an arrow.
Yeah. And we also have to assume that while this entire thing was happening, Navarre was still being kept in the dark about the Venom. So there is also the very real possibility that, like, I don't think it's possible to assume that Taryn didn't know about the Venom, because that would be really surprising. But, like, if Naolin didn't and Brennan didn't and they learned, they were like, yeah, great, in.
I mean, I had this in my notes. I didn't really have any evidence for it. But, like, do you think Fen really shot Brennan? Like, do you think that really happened?
I think that entire thing is not real. Like, I think
Fen was infantry, right? And
what is Fen doing shooting a rider?
Right.
Right. On the back of an ear? I don't know.
Is it a crossbow?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have this. So my next key player that I called out was Fen, and my notes, I'm reading this because they're funny. I don't really get how he was captured, since he obviously didn't die in battle, and also he was infantry, so how was she shooting a rider in the chest? Question mark, question mark, question mark. But I assume Taryn incapacitated everyone to the point where the rest of Navarre's army could arrive and deal with them. Like, if I'm, like, thinking about what happened, Naolin does whatever he does. Taryn loses it. Like, that's what I think happened.
Then that means that Naolin has not drained Taryn to his last,
to the point of almost
energy.
dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
If he goes berserk after, then that's not what happened.
Oh, God. And we know that. Like, we know that Taryn, like, Naolin dying almost killed Taryn. Like, that's pretty widely accepted human lore,
unless this is why they won, right? Because Taryn was fighting for Tyrrendor. Naolin drains him, Taryn is taken out, and now Navarre can swoop in and win.
But how would that not be told?
I'm not saying anything we're saying here makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that makes more sense, but why would Kaori, like...
Because Taryn is so powerful and they want him on their side, but why would Taryn fucking go back to Navarre? He wouldn't. I don't know.
Unless Taryn and Sgaeyl basically have a huddle afterwards and are like, hey, the only way that we can win is from the inside.
Similar to what they do at the beginning of Iron Flame. Right. Because they wouldn't kill Taryn. If they can have Taryn as a weapon, they wouldn't kill him, right?
The next key player that I had, gosh, this is shaping up to be a really long episode. You guys are just gonna have to bear with us for this. We'll cut a lot of it out.
History part 2, part 2.
The next key player I had was Lilith. So if you listen to our podcast, you know that I think Lilith is the Snape of this series. I know that she ultimately captured Fen. I have the same question you do. Like, how did she capture everybody? Storm wielding is powerful, but, like, did she bring down the cliffs of Draylor? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the quote is, her mom is responsible for the capture of nearly all our parents. This is to the entire group of marked riders at Sgaeyl. What?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So was this like a hide and seek expedition that Lilith just like crushed everyone at? Like, I don't know.
I think she has to have. See, this is where I get stuck. We know that she knows about the Venom at this point. A, she's I think already a general, but B, she's had her face off with Theophany. We talked last episode, or maybe we haven't. There's a quote that Theophany says, your mother knew at her age that she was no match for me. She says it to Violet, right? So this blows
Yeah.
all of our, Lilith didn't know about the venom. She was already like deeply entrenched when they told her. No.
Oh, she
Lilith
knew.
knew at Violet's age, when she was a cadet, that she was no match for Theophany. Lilith has known about the venom since she was a cadet. So she very much knows about the venom during the Tyrrish Rebellion. I'm having a hard time justifying her actions given that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think Lilith and Asher are Warwick and Lyra. Like, I think Lilith actually was a bad guy through the rebellion, basically, through the end of the rebellion. And with Asher dying, I think she has a change of heart. That's what I think about Lilith.
I think you might be right. I mean, so I had for how could one woman, and maybe they mean she was responsible because she was like commanding the army or a troop or something. I don't know. But if they literally mean Lilith was responsible for all of their parents, I think she has to have betrayed them, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like she has to have known where they were meeting, something like that, and then betrayed them and said, hey, like, or found out about it, I guess. I guess there is a nicer look at this. But yeah, it's a puzzler for sure.
Yeah. I have no good explanation for how she could have captured all of them, unless, to your point, like she is responsible for those who did, like leads the squad that did.
Yeah. And my only other thought on why she would do that. I mean, again, I mentioned before that I was rereading the scene with Lilith and Violet after Xaden breaks her out of the dungeon. And she says twice, she was like, you have no idea like the lengths I would go to for my children. Yeah. Violet says, like, what about their children? And she says, again, like, when you have children, we can have this conversation, basically. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. And, she thinks Fen just killed Brennan. So, like, is this all just revenge because Fen put an arrow through Brennan's heart? Like, could this have gone differently? Would this have gone differently if A, she knew Brennan was alive, B, Fen, if he did put an arrow through Brennan's heart, had not done that?
Yeah. And I think that's a case actually against Lilith being on the inside prior to the end of the rebellion. Like, if she were supporting them in some way, like, Fen doesn't, like, hold love in high regard, but he does hold his children in high regard. Like, that's what he says about love. He's like, save love for your children. And so if they were working together, I find it hard to believe that Fen shot Brennan in the chest, or would have meant to, at least.
It all is so curious because then there's the Asher question,
So he's my next one.
Okay, let's talk about it.
We can't not talk about him, right? Like, I know that he was not mentioned at all in the context of the rebellion.
I texted Ronnie. I said, okay, you put key players in the outline. Who are the key players? And she goes, well, I wanted to be a surprise.
I think I said I wanted us to come up with them independently, but I also kind of, as I was writing them, I was like, there's no way that if I send this list, she's not going to be like, where are you going with this? So Asher I included because, one, because of the relationship with Lilith, and two, because of the research that he was doing before and around this time, right? So this one is complex because if you listen to our episodes, you know that I want to believe that Asher was a double agent, but if he were, he must have been super covert because Brennan, who is now a high-ranking member of the rebellion, says he, quote, chooses to believe that Asher didn't know about the venom. And so if Asher were a key member of the rebellion, undercover or whatever, like Brennan at least would have figured out that were the case once he got inside. Unless he's an Agent Day type situation.
Crescent City call out. I have two kind of rebuttals to that. One, the entire leadership has been eliminated. The entire leadership of the first rebellion has been eliminated. They were basically starting from scratch, right? So if Asher was a double agent and the only people who knew about that was the leadership, then that knowledge went to the grave with everyone, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But then there is Llewellyn and Lindell and Ulysses and Surrey, and I'm like, where the fuck were all of you during the first rebellion? So, like,
and we know that Llewellyn at least is, like, friendly enough with them where I'm like, you were definitely just, like, overlooked in these executions.
Yeah, right. So, I
so
guess the rebellion never really died, but...
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's I don't think he has to have been that deep, right? Like if Fen knew, if Mary knew, if Garrick's parents knew. I mean, I think Garrick, do we find out that Garrick's dad was Fen's right-hand man, right? So if all of them knew, but only them, then
maybe it died with them. Secrets die with the people who keep them and all that.
Secrets die. Yeah. Thank you, Atos.
Thank you, Atos. Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew Asher was researching about how to bring down the venom. Like, he literally says in his note to Violet that he, like, if you need the weapon to bring these people down, like, read here. Like, to me, that's a big, like, I know about this and I'm trying to help the people who are trying to do something about it. And he taught Violet and Brennan Tyrrish. So maybe, like, so to your point, maybe no one from the current rebellion knows him, but maybe he was supporting the last rebellion. So Asher, like, I think he could have been what turned Lilith at the end of the day. Because coming back to Lilith, right, like there is reason for us to believe that she had been working from the inside, at least from the rebellion onward. She doesn't regret letting Xaden into the Rider Squadron, even after all that happens. She's still like, nope, everything was to get Violet to this moment. And I think after Asher died, she made it her mission to finish his work. Like, we have that unsent correspondence to him that's saying, like, you didn't have enough time. You didn't have enough lessons that you could give Violet. Like, all we can hope for is that she's okay now.
I think she says specifically in that letter, like, she won't understand. And I'm like, Lilith, I don't understand.
I also do not understand. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I unfortunately think this is one of those episodes where we don't have answers. It's just a lot of questions, but I think we're asking good questions and maybe the right questions. I don't know.
Yeah. Tyrrish Rebellion, still a significant question mark. I have one more key player that is off the back of Asher, and I'm curious what your expression is going to be when I bring it up. My last key player is King Tauri, and the reason that, obviously, he is the king of Navarre, so there's that. Like, he is the opposing side of Tyrrendor in this rebellion, sort of. But we had someone comment on one of our clips where we talked about how did Asher know about Warwick's journal? How is he getting to the Isles? How does he know that Warwick wanted the wards to be a secret? He seems to know a lot of things that we know to be in the royal archives. So someone commented on one of our clips that the Sorrengails and the Tauris were close. We know that they were. Violet and Holden dated. Lilith and King Tauri, like, arrived at the unification celebration together. We know the Sorrengails and the Tauris were close. Could King Tauri have helped Asher get access to the things that he had access to and get this information? I don't know.
I'm not silent because I don't believe it. I'm silent because I'm thinking about it.
I think it could actually not be that crazy of a theory. Like, I definitely believe that King Tauri would still want to know how to defeat the Venin, because you see the doom coming, right? Like, you see Paromiel getting encroached upon.
So he's not a Tyrrish sympathizer, but clearly he knows about the Venin and wants to find a weapon to defeat them, which is what we know that Asher was looking for.
Yeah. And so could that be how Asher was playing double agent, is he was helping King Tauri figure out the weapon while also realizing all of this and thinking, like, oh wow, it's really actually messed up that we're not helping Paromiel.
Maybe. I need to think about it.
So we have a lot of open questions about the Tyrrish Rebellion. Anything else? Any other theory?
I have a couple things. So getting back to Lilith, Imogen says when we first meet Imogen, and she's big, bad, scary Imogen, not the Imogen we love now, not that she's not still big, bad, and scary.
Sure.
When they're fighting on the mat, Violet and Imogen are fighting on the mat. She says, "You bitch," she sees. "Your mother murdered my family," which I thought was interesting that she used the word murdered. We also find out that Imogen's sister was executed as well, not just Imogen's mother, which I thought was interesting. We don't know how old Imogen's sister was, but it is stated that it's the parents of the children of the rebellion that are killed, not the siblings. However, it also says basically every rebellion rider was put to death. So maybe she just fell into that category and wasn't necessarily executed by Kodag. I think, I mean, I have other quotes there, but I don't have much more notes there. I just think it's interesting to remember that the sister died. The next thing I went back and I reread Lilith and Taryn's kind of interactions at Threshing right after Taryn has bonded Violet. And there's obviously there's going to be a moment of recognition, but I feel like there's an oh shit moment on Lilith's part. So the quotes are, Taryn and Violet have just showed up at the flight field. I guess it's the flight field, right? And obviously she has bonded Taryn. So she's looking at Lilith, and Violet says, "And now she's staring at my dragon without even bothering to look down and seeing if I'm all right. Fuck her." So I wrote, seems like they know each other. Is Lilith worried Taryn will tell Violet about the Venin? She says, don't say it about Taryn's name. Don't say it, Mom hisses, her eyes on Taryn, not me, not until she does. Obviously, we're seeing this through Violet's eyes, that, like, she thinks that Lilith thinks nothing of her, that Lilith doesn't believe that Violet could spawn such a powerful dragon. But now, obviously, rereading it and going back, I'm like, is it actually that Lilith is looking at Taryn and going, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck. Taryn knows everything. Like, am I about to be in danger here? Is he about to tell Violet about the venom? Is he about to tell Violet about the Tyrrish Rebellion? Like, is everything about to blow up in my face?
As you read that out loud, I also had the thought, I agree with all that, by the way. Like, yeah, I think she definitely, like, I think when she saw that Taryn chose Violet, she was like, okay, I knew this was going to happen anyways, but like cemented that Violet will be sympathizing with the Tyrrish. Like,
Yeah,
that is
good
going to
point.
happen.
Good point. Yeah.
But also, do we think that Lilith is onto the fact that dragons are changing their names and bonding relatives of separatists? And that's why Lilith was like, let her say it.
He was waiting to see if he would say
If he
Taryn.
changed it.
If he changed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That'd be, yeah, maybe. I had that thought too. Could be.
Okay.
All right.
My only notes on the rebellion ending were Fen shooting Brennan with an arrow and then all caps, other dragons took care of them and hid them in a network of caves. Crazy.
Big neon letters. Other dragons.
There are other dragons here.
There are other dragons here. What?
Just, those other dragons. Those casual other dragons. What the
Yes.
Anyways.
All right. I had one more note on the Tyrrish Rebellion. Did you have anything
Sure.
else? So I looked up the meaning of the word apostasy. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a political definition. There's another definition. The formal disaffiliation from, abandonment of, or renunciation of a religion by a person.
Mhm.
It can also be defined within the broader context of embracing an opinion that is contrary to one's previous religious beliefs. So my mind again went to, okay, is there an element of the gods here? Was Tyrrendor renouncing some of the gods? Were they embracing new gods? Is this about, I don't know, but I thought it was interesting that they call it an apostasy. Apostasy.
Yeah.
They call it an apostasy, which no one in Navarre calls it, but that's what the Tyrrish call it. Were the gods involved somewhere?
Yeah. I definitely didn't think of that. I fully thought that apostasy was like their rejection of the belief system that Venom are not.
And it could be
a thing here.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know what gods they would really be rejecting because they have temples.
Or are they rejecting the non-religious affiliation that seems to go, like Navarre is not super religious, right? Not the way the Isles are, right? So is it they are rejecting that, and they are and they have the huge temple to Amari, right? That's like their landmark. So maybe they were trying to come back to the gods.
Maybe. Interesting. Okay.
Tyrrish Rebellion, you hear it here first.
We
still don't know anything.
Yeah.
That should be our t-shirt.
We still know nothing. You know nothing, Abby and Ronnie.
We know nothing.
Well, that was a Jon Snow joke, but
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us about Sgaeyl War College.
All right. So maybe we should have done this in the last episode because I believe that Sgaeyl was founded around the time of the unification. And the reason I say that, it was a war camp, right? There is a quote in Iron Flame chapter 7. There are 89 of you in this room. From what the scribes tell me, you are the smallest class to walk this hall since the first 6. So it was a hall. It was not just a war camp. But in my mind, that means it was built, basically.
It was already existing.
Which makes no sense. Which makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, like what was it before that? I don't know.
The first 6 had to go to dragon school. Who was teaching them? Who was teaching them how to ride a dragon? Anyway, I don't think this makes any sense. The only thought I had is maybe it was a war college in Moraine before the unification. So maybe it was like but we talked about how it was a war camp. So it was founded right after the unification. This I thought was interesting. It was built by a man named Aaron Norris. We know this because Violet says, I sent up a silent thanks to Aaron Norris for building Sgaeyl with stone stairs instead of wooden ones with the potential to creak or burn. I believe this is when they're going into the dungeons to face off against the Brennan that are near Jack's cell. Baylor, who's one of the first years in their squad, his last name is Norris. So I'm like, is this a descendant of Aaron Norris? Does that matter? I don't know. The only thing I'll say about that is that once again, when Violet thinks this, Taryn gets sketchy. Taryn says, pay attention to the present, not the past. So I don't know why Taryn would be sketchy about the construction of Sgaeyl War College, except for what we just mentioned, that it doesn't make any sense. But we know when Taryn says, well, we hypothesize that when Taryn says pay attention, it means there's dragon secrets afoot, basically.
Yeah.
The only other thing is that it's built on runes, apparently, which I think is interesting because we know that runes were a Tyrrish custom. We talked about how runes kind of like, it doesn't make sense that runes existed before Dragon Riders. So like, what is Tyrrendor's role? Because I'm assuming it's the Tyrrish that are experts on them at this point. What is Tyrrendor's role in constructing Sgaeyl? What do those runes do?
And we know that the runes in Aretia, I think, are like, there are masking runes that Aretia is built on that conceal
The ward
Aretia when you
chamber.
fly overhead. Yeah.
All of Aretia?
I don't know if it's all of Aretia, but it's definitely the ward chamber at least.
The ward chamber for sure.
And regardless, like those exist. And so like, are there protective runes that Sgaeyl was built on? Probably. If I'm the builder of Sgaeyl, I would like some.
Yeah. That's all I really had. Did you have more?
I did. But Sgaeyl War College sits at like where it's located. It sits at the intersection of Moraine and Deaconshire and is like pretty close to the border of Lucerys, but not super close. It's notably not built in Chaldeer. And the fact that it's not built in Chaldeer is brought up a suspicious number of times. And again, Chaldeer is where King Towery and the royal family generally reside. And there were, like Violet mentions in her narration, there were political ramifications to establishing Sgaeyl where it is and not in Chaldeer. So why could it have been necessary to establish there? I don't have a super complex answer. I just think it has to be about why the Vale is where it is. So when we think about like what makes sense, right? Chaldeer is the furthest province from the Barrens, with the exception of Lucerys. And so it makes sense that we'd want the royals to live as far from the Venin stronghold as possible. The dragons have also seemed to have chosen the westernmost ancestral hatching grounds to establish their new hatching grounds. The green hatching grounds are the westernmost, and they're the furthest from the Venin. So I think because I basically hypothesized that between when the first six approached the dens and when Sgaeyl was established, it was an agreement between the dragons, because this was a war college, but the riders were like dependent on the dragons effectively to just exist. I think the dragons basically said, hey, like, we'll go as far west as possible. We agree with you there, but like, you're going to build your war college on top of our hatching grounds and you're going to establish your wardstone here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with all that. There is a quote that implies that from Warwick's journal that says, after we placed the last rune, we placed the wardstone where the dragons felt the deepest currents of magic run. And I know Rebecca has talked in interviews that there's currents of magic basically running through the continent, and magic has different strengths depending on where you are. So according to Warwick, this is where the deepest currents of magic run in the continent. I think there's a couple things there. One is that because of the Vale and because all the dragons are hatching there now, or is it that the deepest currents of magic are there, so that's where they chose the Vale to be? It's kind of a chicken dragon egg situation, if you will. One. Two, the dragons said that's where the deepest current of the magic is, and we know that the dragons lie.
Yeah. And if it is where the deepest currents of magic run, like why did only the greens have their ancestral hatching grounds there?
The greens have the strongest connection to magic, right? Or the most stable connection to magic.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a good point. I don't know. Maybe the dragons used to fight each other.
Yeah. That's just like also brings me back to like if we are relating dragons to gods and the greens are related to Amari, who is the queen of the gods, maybe that has something to do with it.
But yeah, like that's why because she's the queen of the gods, that's where
where there's the most power.
Yeah, maybe.
The only other note that I had is that Lyra was deputy commanding general of Sgaeyl War Camp in its early days. So
before she defected to Tyrrendor.
Yeah. So I think we can reasonably say that the Six had a hand in where it was built.
And I think we should talk about the magic currents again, right? Like, okay, did Lyra place that wardstone in Aretia because of it comes down to, is it politics or magic, right? So did she place the wardstone in Aretia because Braxton was willing to put wards there and to let the people of Coromil in, or are there deep currents of magic there as well?
Yeah.
I don't think we know.
don't think we know. Okay. Anything else on Sgaeyl?
No.
Okay. So our last topic is, I cleverly titled it Undocumented History. I don't know why. Most of the history in this freaking series is undocumented. We'll start by talking about the Brennan cover-up. I mostly have prompting on this topic. I have some theories. We know, right, that the Brennan have been effectively erased from Navarrian history. We've been told it only takes one desperate generation to change history. I think we can reasonably assume that when Navarre went to war with Poromiel 400 years ago, so call it 230 AU, the Brennan were erased from the archives.
That's what I thought. That's what I always thought, that would be the answer that makes sense. But Violet specifically says that she thinks it was 400 AU. So 200 years after that. And I'm with you. I'm like, it only makes sense for them to have started doing this with the war in Poromiel, right? That is what would make sense. But she specifically says 400 AU is when she suspects the cover-up started.
Then was there another cover-up? Because we also know that nothing in the archives is older than 400 years.
Right.
I thought that everything was wiped when the conflict started. But there could have been two cover-ups because we also know that the Irids were covered up. I had assumed, I'll just talk through what I had assumed, then let's talk about why Violet decided to prove it wrong and whether it's an oopsie or not. We can probably infer that I inferred that this was related to the Brennan rising to power, Navarre not accepting refugees, plus controlling the Teladium, and Poromiel being desperate. War was declared, and Navarre basically said, we have to remain in the image of the good guys and in the image of protecting our people. We're going to erase the concept of Brennan from the archives. I had also assumed that the Irid cover-up happened around the same time, because the Irids were known by the Six and Lyra. She made a second wardstone and said, in case the others returned.
I think the Irid cover-up happened when Sgaeyl was built, because there are only 6 dragons in the Rotunda. So whatever happened, it had to have been bad enough for Warwick. And we talked about this last episode, if Warwick actually was trying to erase the Irids or not, but whatever happened was bad enough for the Irids to not make it to the Rotunda. Or it's an oopsie.
Would it be that weird if they weren't carved into Sgaeyl if they chose not to bond? Sgaeyl is dedicated to riders, and Irids don't have riders.
Maybe that's a good point.
And Lyra, brings that second wardstone, creates that second wardstone in Aretia in case they returned. I don't know that it necessarily means that the Irids were covered up that early.
I don't know. Yeah, you might be right. It seems weird to me, though, that there would be no record of them. I don't know. In my mind, that Rotunda was kind of the definitive proof that they were trying to erase the Irids from the history books immediately. But
I can't rationalize those two things happening separately, though, because, what's really the point of covering up the Irids if you're not covering up the Brennan? Why cover up the Irids? What is the motivation?
Well, we're told Warwick's motivation is that he doesn't want anyone outside of the wards to be kind of, safe. He doesn't want the power of the wards to be extended to anyone else.
Yeah, but just because the Irids exist doesn't mean that... That's why he covered up how the wardstones were created. But just because the Irids exist doesn't mean,
right.
oh god, you can make wards.
Yeah, I don't think we have a good explanation for why the Irids have been erased from history.
Yeah. I feel like they were covered up together, but maybe they weren't.
I also feel like they were covered up in 233 AU when they went to war with Poromiel, but
Correct.
It says 400.
So what is the actual quote when Violet says that? I don't have it written down.
But when did we close our borders? As soon as we unified, or closer to 400 AU when I think we wiped the history from the books?
Are we sure that Rebecca didn't mean to just write 400 years ago?
I know! I banged my head against...
In Fourth Wing, Chapter 35, we are told that nothing in the archives is older than 400 years.
It would make a lot more sense if it was 200 AU.
And the
or 400 years ago.
The 400s was the Second Krovlan Uprising. Why, Violet?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, open question there, I guess, then.
We still know nothing.
We still know nothing. I feel like we don't need to belabor why the Brennan were covered up. I think that's well understood. When I thought I knew. I guess I don't. Don't know. But we do know that the Brennan cover-up is inextricably weaved with cover-ups of runes, cover-up of Irids. When did all of these things happen? I would have assumed that it was just a fresh start from the archives. When we got rid of everything older than 400 years old, we just took out All of that. That's what I had assumed.
It is what I would have assumed as well.
All right, fine. Anything else on the Venom cover-up?
I think it's interesting that we have you mentioned this before, nothing in the archives is more than 400 years old. So we have I forget exactly what the term was on Hedotus, but my mind went to Hedotus, right? Where they are getting rid of everything old. I think they call it a beautification, right? And replacing it with new things. So they're doing it with their architecture, but Sgaeyl did it with their
They called it
archives.
the intention.
With
Hedotus
intention.
called it the intention.
Okay, so here's actually a theory we haven't talked about at all, but that I had at one point. We are assuming Sgaeyl leadership is covering up the Venom to justify their war with Poromiel. What if it's Sgaeyl leadership has been infiltrated by Venom, and the Venom are covering up the Venom to make them less able to fight against the Venom?
Yeah. I think both of those are distinct possibilities. Yes. In fact, I think they probably are both true, actually.
Yeah.
Like anyone who's not Venom thinks that they're covering up the Venom to protect their own borders, and the Venom in leadership are covering up the Venom so they can be like, gotcha.
Yeah, gotcha. Surprise. Yeah, I do think they're both true.
I also, like, the Venom can channel within the wards, so what's that about? We still don't know.
I have nothing to say. The wards make no sense.
What is the point of the
wards?
ward?
Make no sense.
What is the point? Just the wyvern can't fly through them. That's it.
The wyvern can't fly through them. Jack can channel.
Yeah, the Venom can channel. People turn within the wards.
But people can turn within the wards, right? So, remember the end of Iron Flame where or it's not the end, but Lilith is like, your wards are failing, the flyers can channel. And Violet is like, oh shit, you're right, the flyers can channel. Mm-hmm. Couldn't the flyers always channel within the Aretia wards? Wasn't that kind of the point?
Maybe this is something I totally
The runes on the Aretia wardstone were always supposed to let the flyers channel. That's Mira's whole point.
Yeah, right.
Right. So the flyers should have always been able. It doesn't mean the wards weren't falling, but that piece of the argument doesn't work because the flyers were always supposed to be able to channel under the Aretia wardstone.
I don't think Violet knew that though.
She didn't.
Yeah.
But it's just but that's not an actual indication that the wards were falling. They were, but the flyers could always channel.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that Lilith just like had never seen the Aretian wardstone, or was just like, I assume it's the same wardstone. But Lyra is a flyer lover, so she made sure that one was going to work for them.
Do you think that Warwick just loved Lyra and Lyra actually loved the flyer, and it was an unrequited love situation?
I don't think Lyra loved Warwick. I don't know who she loved, but I don't think she loved Warwick.
Yeah. Well, there's that quote about the opposing ideologies. Anyway, I can't wait for the Real Housewives of Navarre.
Same.
Is that what we should have called this podcast?
Real Housewives of Navarre. Well, no, because neither of us are housewives.
Neither of us are housewives, and there's only two of us. We're not drunk all the time. Anyways,
when have we fought the Venom before? So, like, I just think that we've never not been fighting the Venom.
I kind of agree.
They never I don't know how much to discuss here. We see the map in Aretia, and we know that they have been rising for years, just on that map alone. I just think they've been progressing since 600 years ago. But I do think had to have been times in those 600 years when they were beaten back. And so, like, that's what I choose to think about is, like, when could they have been beaten back? If they had been rising at this pace for the last 600 years, we'd all be dead. Like, we'd be done. There's no way. So I assume they've been to the Isles, as Violet directly asks King Cortland, and he was sketchy about it. Like, did the Irids help them beat back the Venom? I don't know. Did Poromiel have some success in their studies and methods where they could beat back the Venom over the last few centuries? Probably, but I don't think they've ever been actually defeated.
I agree. And here's my other thing. Even if you beat every single Venom, killed all of them, what's to stop someone from turning Venom? Someone new. Right? Like, can you ever really beat them?
Right. Yeah. Like, as long as somebody is aware that they can put their hand on the ground and channel from the earth, like, there's really nothing. It's not like Venom have to have Venom babies to continue. Like, yeah, they just spawn.
It's not right. It's not like they're not like a breed or a species that, like,
yeah. No. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you.
Are we ready to move on to Precog Corner, though?
You know, we've been talking for 2.5 hours. Even if I have other notes on here, they could not have been that important.
Fair enough. Okay, so one thing that I noticed, actually, as I was doing some research on Brennan, the Venom seemed to be coming from the water. And the reason that I say that is in Aretia, when Violet's there for the first time, kind of like conscious and talking to Brennan after they have been apart for 6 years and she just found out that he's alive, she's looking at the map in Aretia, which actually has the like venin markings.
Right.
And I kind of latched on to this quote. The red ones, meaning the red marks on the map, mark not only the oceanic eastern border of the Krovlan province along the Bay of Malak, but are heavily concentrated north into the plains as well, spreading like a disease. So they are coming from the oceanic border and spreading into the plains. The orange ones, those heavily concentrated along the Stonewater River, which leads straight to Navarre's border. So we know that they're coming from the bay, they're clustered around the Stonewater River. Like, why are the venin moving along bodies of water? So,
well, yeah, and they're coming from the Barrens, which have been drained of all magic. So what is feeding them?
right. And we've talked about the water being vibrant in the
Yeah.
Isles before. What does the water have in it that could be sustaining the venin? At first I was thinking about this like, oh, do people just travel along bodies of water? Like, is that just like an easy place to travel? But it's actually not, especially an oceanic border. It would be much easier to just travel across land. If you look at the map, the Barrens is obviously all the way to the east. Krovla is to the west of the Barrens, but there's the Bay of Malak in between them.
Right.
And so they're coming across the water. We're in class. Everybody pull up the map. So the venin drained the Barrens. We know that for sure. Now we see that there are a bunch of red marks along the oceanic eastern border. So along the basically western border of the Bay of Malak, eastern border of Krovla. So they're either coming up and then down, or they're just coming straight across. And then up, heavily concentrated along the Stonewater River, which is that river that runs from the tip of the Bay of Malak into the mountain range, basically. So this got me thinking, right? Like, the Isles have no magic. We have talked before about, have the venin been to the Isles? What if the venin are like actually traveling by water, or maybe even being powered by water?
Yes, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know. And then I took this theory like way too far, and I was like, what if we talked last episode about the Irids and how they're effectively a different species from dragons, and then we talked about how Auric said, like, very bold of us to assume that we're the only continent. What if, like, to your point on the origin story being different from the Great War, venin are traveling by water, like, what if there is another continent and that is where the Irids are from, and it's just Irids and venin, and that's it?
I don't think I don't buy the theory. I don't think there's a world in which the Irids and the venin are living in harmony.
Definitely, yeah, I agree with you, not harmony. We get that from the Irids just being like, you're an abomination.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. But I am starting to I'm definitely buying into the idea of water magic, and I'm buying into the idea of there being another continent.
Yeah, so.
I just finished a book where there were two different kinds of dragons. There were fire breathers and there were water-based dragons. But Andarna did breathe fire. We don't know if the other
breathe fire.
Can breathe fire.
I don't know. And is it one of those things where like the Irids have just assumed that they couldn't, but then Andarna proves that they could? Like maybe they didn't know that they could have tails that were not feather tails either. Andarna's breaking all the rules.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I like it. I like all of them. Keep them coming.
We'll see. Okay.
All right.
I'm fatigued.
Do you want to skip reading corner? I already did my reading corner. I'm reading Thrones of Glass, and you should too. Throne of Glass.
Throne of Glass. So just for listeners, we usually round out with what we're reading. You were reading Throne of Glass, which we talked about at the beginning of the episode. I am like very like slowly trying to reread ACOTAR in preparation for our next season. I'm not doing a great job. I'm just like, I'm reading the first, so light ACOTAR spoilers. I'm reading the first one. I'm just like, wow, this shit's boring. Like, other than the few like interesting pieces I come across where I'm like, oh, this like could be a theory. Like, and I would say there's like maybe one or two every few chapters.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I hear what you're saying. You know, I read ACOTAR knowing that the first book was not representative of the entire series. I still found it enjoyable, but it was also my first introduction into this world. So yeah, I get it. I
found the first read enjoyable as well. Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Well, that was part 2 of history. It was a little bit of a winding road. So thank you for sticking with us.
You're still here. Thank you.
Please continue reaching out to us. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as Dragons in the Details Pod. We also have a Discord
We have a
now, as we
Discord.
called out at the beginning of this episode.
We should have called it Panic at the Discord. Damn.
That has nothing to do with dragons
I
or
know.
fantasy. And we also have an email address, dragonsinthedetailspod@gmail.com. Feel free to email us. We've been getting your emails and we love them.
We love emails, guys.
It's so heartwarming. Even if you have no notes, suggestions, just like say hi. Other people are doing it too. It's okay. It's no worries, and we'll say hi back.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Love
we love
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.